Okay, so just like with the schema of the tree, we're going to create three-dimensional schema, but ones that don't have any kind of a reference, right? Instead, these are things that we use to structure objects. They're pure three-dimensional objects, and the idea is to draw them and just try to rotate them around in your mind and redraw them, right? So okay, you could start with a cylinder, right? And we're just sort of thinking logically, right? Oops, it's okay to mess it up. Now remember, according to what we know about how cylinders progress in space, this one is going to be more closed. One is going to be more closed. One of these circles is going to be more closed, or ellipses, and one is going to be more open, depending on where you're looking, right? So if this one is more closed, that means that our eye line is somewhere right about here, right? And we're looking down on it. So what we're trying to do is just practice adjusting that in space, right? If this one is more closed, and then what we're trying to do is make this same cylinder. So if I zoom out, I try to keep those proportions exactly the same. See, so this drawing, it doesn't make sense anymore because it has two different worlds, right? The camera's in two different places. So here, the eye line is here. But what we're trying to do in this exercise is control these solids and make them all the same, right? So to me, when I see this one and this one, they do look the same, and but the position and the distance has changed, right? This is further away, and my eye line is here. I'm looking up. This is closer, and my eye line is here, right? So, okay, so now there's a few obvious ones. So taking this same shape, we are just going to make as many different positions as we can, right? So if we're looking at the first circle straight on, you can make this as big or as small as you're comfortable with, right? So we're looking at the first circle straight on, and then maybe our eye line is here, and then we'll see it diminish this way, and then we'll see the other circle just barely, right? You might see something like this. Your eye line is here again. This circle is a little bigger. Cool, right? So if we learn these in the abstract, then it means that we sort of have control over them. Like, if you're going to draw a cup or something, then you already have all these mechanics, right? Like you have control over it. If your eye line is in the middle, then the circle would flex out in both directions. Just drawing rapidly is really appropriate for this because basically that keeps your line straight and it keeps you thinking really compositionally, right? Okay, let's just see how many more we can do. But we're always trying to make sure that it's the same space, right? And that it's the same object. And that is basically the same as I look through it, right? And draw it tilted. So tilted, and then I see this surface. I know automatically that my eyes are here, right? And then I can rotate my paper, but I'm gonna try not to, just so that I can be practicing how the circle moves through space, right? Cool. Now, and I have a sense of the cylinder. And see, I had a sense immediately when it was too short. now I'm getting used to it. Now I can probably make it really small, so I'm going to make it from above. And then I'm used to its proportions. It's just like practicing scales for music or something like that, right? And then if you do this, enough, you really have a sense of like when you take this schema and then apply it to something you see in real life. It's the practice is being able to just rapidly assess proportion, and say like if I drew the same thing and I drew this, oh shoot, that's way too long, and know when you've made a mistake, right? Proportion and composition are the reason that anything looks like a mistake ever. If you're drawing a face and it looks like a mistake, the reason that it's wrong is because of proportion. So by going rapidly through these objects, and then it's also fun to draw them all in the same space, right? So this is the eye line is below, we're looking up at it. But remember, if the further you get from the eye line, right? So here's the eye line, here's the little circle. Further you get from the eye line, the bigger it gets. So see how this circle is really open? So then this circle, even though it's smaller, has to be even more open, something like that. And then that pushes this away, and then this circle has to be even more open because we're looking up at it, right? So already by just having these rules in mind, you can really create unordered space really easily, right? And you can create the illusion that everything is in the same space. So when we get here, we have a kind of cylinder where if your eye line was in the middle of it, and by now I'm really sensitive to its proportions. I don't want it to get too big. If my eye line is in the middle of it, then I see both the top and the bottom. If my eye line is below it, then now it has to be, see how narrow that is? I have to reuse that same width. That's narrow. And then this has more curve. And by narrow and curved, I just mean more open. So this is an ellipse approaching more of a circle, right? That's the top surface. Cool, right? You can do a really cool drawing just with the one simple shape, because all of a sudden everything just lines up and the proportion works and the space looks right. Cool. So this is one example. Now what you're going to try to do is come up with as many primitive forms as you can, right? And try to change their position in space in just this way, right? And try to always have a sense of where your eye line is, how it should operate, right? So let's do another example, and this one is really important. Is a sphere, right? People always think that a sphere is the most simple shape, but it is the most complex actually, and it's the most difficult to perceive, right? So if you have a sphere, so what I like to do is use a median, right? Like make an equator. So there is a sphere. So that shows me that my eye line is here, right? And then this part of the sphere is a little bit bigger. All right, so I can, in even drawing this way, it really gives you a sense, because in life there's never round objects, right? There's never perfect spheres. But if you see something that's almost spherical, and then you can create this median and relate it to your eye line, then you can locate things on the surface of this sphere, right? So maybe there's like a little object here or something like that, right? So already it's really spatial, really dynamic. Like you could take spheres. So in this one, remember we put our eye line here, we made a big series of shapes. So if you put a sphere here, and then you take a look at this circle that you have going and how open it should be, how close to a circle versus this, should be more open than this, right? So then you can you can draw this median really clearly, right? We're looking down on it. And all of a sudden, just like the tree, it feels way more spatial, right? Way more spatial, because you can see the position of the camera. That's basically what drawing always is the position of the camera. If you get a bunch of objects in the same orientation, it just naturally looks real and dimensional, right? Then let's try some cubic objects. Okay, so even this, like, try to think through exactly what you're doing, right? So this is a pyramid. I have to draw the other side to see it, and then I feel like I'm looking down on it. So I feel like I'm looking down on it a lot. So maybe the eye line is way down here, right? Now if I look at it directly from the top, try to get those same proportions, you'll see that that's a point. That's where it meets, right? And every time I do this, I'm understanding these solids a little bit better, right? So now what if I can just move this up, just a little bit, just like to here, right? But I still want this part to be basically flat, so I can see these sides. So see, that's a pretty interesting view that I wouldn't normally expect. I wouldn't normally be able to draw. But all of it, gets us used to this idea that something, even though this length is really long, if I'm in a certain position, I can see that length just disappear, right? So if something is pointed straight at me, it looks totally different, right? And then obviously we can work through a cube. I'm just going to start with one surface, and this is really looking down on it, right? So in that idea, right, this surface is almost all the way open. So to make sure that we're being real, then this surface has to be more open, right? Okay, so that's basically a cube. Oh, gosh. And then, and that's looking a little unreal to me. Like, see how that looks too pointy? So I'm trying to establish the object, and it doesn't look like a cube. It looks like it's a little bit too tall. So I think that this point is a little bit too high to be real space. Right, so you want a sense of it moving back. Okay, cool. Now I'm kind of getting there, right? Take this solid and then keep rotating it around, making it smaller. Right. So if I look at it straight on and then pivot it just a little, you could see these surfaces only. So then I'm looking at it straight on, but then maybe from a little down here, or this is kind of the direction. So my eye line is actually on this side, just a little bit off of straight on, right? Because I can see above and the left-hand side, right? And now here's kind of the challenge: is you get intuitive about it, and it just doesn't feel like the same cube, right? Like, this doesn't feel right to me. I think that it's too tall, so I'm going to try to redraw this exact same thing so that I get a perfect cube. And it's all about just building your sensitivity to three-dimensional things. Yeah. Okay, that is looking much better. That looks much more real. And there's something about it, I can't explain why, but it looks like this. It looks like it could be the same object. This doesn't look real. It fell out of reality somehow because I was maybe drawing it too fast or something like that. But basically, if you take all of these and you keep that eye line the same, then like here you'll have a drawing that makes sense in real space with all of these little elements, right? All right, so see how this pyramid is way below. So even if I rotate the pyramid and I show the flat side straight on, right? But I think that this is way, way below. So this is awkward for the pyramid as well because all of that will occur there. These still are kind of looking like they're in the same space, right? Whatever I do with, if I think of this as a continuous reality, just this panel here, I keep my eye line consistent, and and then I think of myself as really looking down on these objects. And so I'm seeing like the very top of it. Then it does look consistent, right? Something like this. And then if you start working with like overlap and distance, this really looks like a continuous space to me. Cool. So, and then I would say, just try to make as many geometric solids like this that you can think of, and think of rotating them around when you're drawing. Have one area, just like I did, where you use the exact same eye line and apply it to a whole bunch of things. It doesn't have to be vertical. It can go from left to right. But remember, if your eye line is somehow over here, then you'll be seeing a lot more of the left-hand side of objects. And now finally, you can ink this any way you want. I'm going to choose my brush, but you might choose your pen. And remember, this is just a matter of finding the outside of things, right? When you start inking stuff, you also can think of a light source, right? So I'm going to think that I have a light source kind of right in the middle like that. Doot, 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 right? And then anything that's away from my light source is going to be a heavier brush line. Or if you're using those Japanese nibs, those are great too. Anything that's approaching my light source is going to be as light a brush line as I can make it, right? So for instance, this is away from my light source, so I'm going to do really heavy brush line, a really heavy brush line. And just with the line weight, I'm adding a lot of real space to my drawing, right? I make this as delicate as I possibly can because it is one of the upper surfaces. So see how shadowed that is? And also notice how my line sits on the outside of the object. The line is not on the inside of the object. If your lines on the inside of the object are cross contours, but which are different than line itself. So for this circle, I'm making that super heavy, and it already gives me a sense of weight and shadow. And sometimes you just can suggest the rest of the line. It's super heavy on this side because my light source is there, right? The line is actually a boundary outside of the object. I think it's an indicator of touch, right? Because when you touch something, your fingertips are on the surface and they're outside of the object. They're not inside the object. So I think that kind of that's what your mind does, is it every time you see a discrete object, you have a sense of what it would be like to touch it, and that's how you understand that object. I'm not even bothering to do the side. I might get it with a wash or something like that. There that really big. And this is really medium. This is actually pretty dark because I'm keeping that line on the outside. Even though you could argue, that's still a touchable edge, the edge of that cylinder. That's my argument for why there's a line there and not a contour. And then this is almost not there because really that's the closest we are to the light source in this whole drawing. So that's really intense. All right, let's see. It's thicker on top than it is toward the bottom. It's thicker here. It's lighter here. There's actually a lot of light getting on this part of it. There's a lot of light on this. There's a lot of light on this. That's kind of medium-ish. That's thick. There's a lot of light there. There's a lot of light there. There's a ton of light on this bottom edge. It's really far away. There's a ton of light. A ton of shadow. Heavy line. Very heavy line. Very heavy line. But leading up to it, medium-ish. Very light on top. See how this point looks wrong to me, right? It's too much open. It's because I know that it's a square, but that's part of why you're doing this, is to train yourself, to look for things that aren't right. Okay, so that looks a little bit better. It looks like the point diminishes a little bit more naturally in space. Let's see, very heavy here, quite heavy, but these are medium to light, these areas, right? Cool. And the line is a touch sensation. It's always on the outside. Gosh, I love these when the brush breaks, those broken effects. That's cool. I try not to do shadows with the line, right? But you can think of this kind of shadow where it's like completely nullified, like this shadow so dark you can't even see. Maybe I always get carried away with that though, because I like because I like ink so much. So be really careful. All right, cool. Now I'm going to switch to some kind of wash, some whatever you have for your middle tone. And you can just use watered down ink. That works great. You could use any of those water soluble media that we've been talking about. I'm just trying to make a grayish watercolor wash here. You don't have to have watercolors. You can literally just put a drop of your ink in water and make a wash that way. It's fine. And then I test it, make sure that it's dark. All this stuff is suitably dry. And then I work through my light again. So this is bright, and maybe this just gets a little bit of an abstract shade. That's a little bright, but it's kind of far away. Gets a little abstract shade right there. I don't mind if I go outside the line, because remember, my ink is waterproof, so all of this is just going to be atmosphere anyways. A cylinder will shade evenly, and then you can think about where it turns the corner. This is actually really dark. I have my shading indications already kind of set up. This is a sphere, so that'll shade along a curve. And definitely attach everything to the space. right? This, let's try a diagonal shading here because it's diagonally away from the light. I think that's possible on a sphere. Here's a round shading. And here's something that's interesting, like see how this is kind of blocking the light from this, so we can cast a shadow from up here. And really, you get so much dimension if you just have a few values, right? Like you just have, this is kind of a mid-tone. Then you have the waterproof ink. This is away from the light. This is in the atmosphere. This is, I'm going to say medium-ish away from the light, so I'll try to tap that with my finger. This is away from the light. It's enclosed in space. This is bright, and this is lighter, so I can use kind of these broken effects. Cool. All right, now once I have all this, I can make it even a little richer with by just making my wash a little darker, however you made the wash. Maybe I'll try to come up with a darker version of my wash just by dipping in a little bit of ink. Okay, now I have a darker version of the wash, and I build that little gradient. But light is really just delicate and ethereal, so you don't need to pay that much attention when you're adding in the light in the shadow. Light bounces around and it falls in different spots. Cool. All right, so now I'm gonna just try to build an environment for this whole thing. That's all. Really simple, right? But the more you get used to seeing things this way, like seeing a coherent three-dimensional atmosphere. When you, like, if you were to draw a coffee cup or something, you'd be like, oh, I'm above this coffee cup, so I know exactly how it's going to look, right? Or even if you're drawing an interior like a desk and chairs, you'll be like, okay, these are basically cubic, so I understand that the seat of the chair is going to be more of a closed square, and the legs, and the square formed by the legs of the chair is going to be a little bit more open. So, I mean, nobody can just hold all this stuff in their imagination. Like, you have to draw from reference, which we'll do a lot in this class. But it's also good to, this kind of practice gives you an approach to the reference, to what you're seeing. Like, whenever you're about to draw something in front of you, like in a studio or drawing from a photograph or something, you already can plot these schema and plot these simple shapes to get you started. So that is basically it for this exercise. The exercise is to draw in pencil a bunch of different simple geometric schema, right? Like especially cylinders, spheres, cubic ones, triangles. Experiment as much as you want and just practice rotating them around in space. And then in part of your drawing, in just half of the drawing maybe, so in one half of the drawing you're just imagining rotating them around just like I did. And then in the other half of the drawing you give one stable eye line and you try to make all of your abstract drawings occupy the same space, and then finish it with line and tone. and sort of show this little dramatic section of space in which everything is logical and everything works. All right, so that's it for this assignment. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.